Welcome to The New Next, a podcast that addresses current events and how they will impact the future. Co-hosted by the inquisitive public speaking champion, Mike McVeigh, and energy, economics, and technology expert, Matt Jensen. Join us as we explore all things energy, economic, tech, and political, and how they will affect our future. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to The New Next with Matt Jensen and Mike McVeigh. And Matt Jensen and Mike McVeigh.
Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Hey, Matt. Life has been interesting since our last recording. It almost feels like deja vu times 4 times on this question.
Yeah.
But so some interesting things. I think it kind of deals with some of the things we talk about with technology. Technology has advanced so much in the past 30 years, and people are like, well, of course it has, but just some of the things that we used to take for granted or used to think were amazing, now those things are so small on the bigger scale.
Yeah. Totally.
Like, you're a little bit younger than me, but you remember when people went to the hospital like in the 90s or maybe the early aughts for something, I think like tonsil removal or something, they might be in the hospital for several days.
Yeah, definitely. Also, signs that, Mike is older than me. He says early aughts.
What's that supposed to mean? You don't say the early aughts?
No.
Well, how do you distinguish between like 2002 and 2008?
The millennium decade.
Yeah, but they're still part of the same decade. But like when you're talking about the earlier, late part of the aughts are just 0 to 0. Don't make me feel older than I already am. I already feel really old. Well, what would you say if I told you that you could probably have brain surgery? Not always, but you could have brain surgery and be home within 30 hours of when the surgeon sewed you up.
I would say that you must know something.
Yeah, so someone pretty close to me, my mom, recently had brain surgery. There was a tumor pressing on her left frontal cortex of her brain, and it had been causing some focus and memory issues, and which is, I mean, we knew something was wrong, but we thought it was like maybe mixed medication or something like that. And then basically, turn of events that my dad took her to the doctor. They did a CAT scan and immediately like said, hey, we can do surgery as soon as 2 or 3 days from now. And so they did surgery, they cut her open, got majority of the tumor out, and then she was home within 30 hours.
Wow.
And we went, I don't remember, let's see, because that was a Tuesday, and she was home on Wednesday. So
that's so well.
I think we visited Wednesday night, not for very long, just a little bit kind of thing. And in my opinion, she was already a little bit more memory and focus was a lot more improved from before the surgery.
Which is wild. She's like been put under and they've sawed into her skull and operated on her, and she's more coherent within 24 hours.
Yeah, it just it shows how weird our bodies are also.
Yeah.
We don't think about stuff like if you have a little pebble in your shoe or something, it might be uncomfortable, but if you imagine that that's actually a part of your body, and so it's not just uncomfortable, but we start, I think our natural tendency as humans is we take that little pebble and we're like, oh, it hurts a little bit, but whatever, we'll deal with it. And by the time we actually deal with it, it's like, oh goodness, this is not good at all. How are you walking?
Walk weirdly until you have a backache, lower back issues.
And they're like, we don't understand what's wrong with your back. And then all of a sudden they see you limping or something, like, why are you walking that way? Oh, I have a pebble in my shoe. And her recovery has been going fairly well. It's been a couple weeks since that happened. I mean, at least on my side it is. And we actually talked with her last night, and was kind of saying, you know, I know what my side feel like, what I hear whenever you're talking, but one of her problems was she was having a hard time constructing her thoughts and being able to vocalize it. And so we talked for a little bit, and I was like, I'm just curious, do you still feel like you're having trouble communicating what you're saying, or do you, in your brain, do you hear something different than what you say out loud? And she said that, yeah, she still has a little bit of that. I don't know to what degree, but on our side, like I wouldn't have even known that. I would just put it like, oh, she's older, you know, she's an older person, so faculties are declining, but they're going to find out some more stuff, I think, in the next couple of days. And, but yeah, it's just amazing. I remember somebody having a small surgery that, was not intense, and they were in the hospital for like 2 weeks in the 90s and in the early aughts. And now that, I mean, I'm wondering like if it's just a in and out surgery, like you go ahead and get that thing done and then you're just sent home within an hour.
How did they like find it originally? Like what sort of, I guess, behaviors was she exhibiting, or how did the whole diagnostic process go?
So my parents recently moved back from another state back in May, and so in the way that she had been acting and stuff, at least for my context, she seemed like my mom, all through May, through majority of June. And then around early July, I noticed her responses were not the same as previously. And some things that she would really want to talk about forever, she was just giving one-word answers. But I thought she was mad at me. And then I found out that a couple other people who were close to her had some similar experiences, but I didn't even find that out till early September. Then there was something specific that happened, and I called my dad, and because my dad was still doing traveling across the United States, and he said that he was going to go ahead and come home. He's going to go ahead and retire a little bit earlier. He's going to retire later this year, so he just moved up his retirement and came home. And through some different conversations with people who've gone through various things, someone mentioned that possibly maybe her medications got switched when she moved back to Oklahoma because she was getting a different doctor. And I was thinking, well, May and June, that's typical. That could be a typical prescription allotment. So, so we mentioned that to my dad, and he looked into it. And it did look like a couple of prescriptions might have been crossed. So he called the doctor, and the doctor basically is like, well, bring her to the emergency room, which was a kind of a weird response. But they did a CAT scan in the emergency room, and that's where they saw the tumor. And that was a Thursday. She was released on a Saturday morning for that part, for the emergency room part. But they said that
which is wild that she was there longer for the diagnostic than she was for the brain surgery.
I think it's just because they're trying to check anything and everything, and so there was a lot more tests being run. And they actually offered. They said that she could stay in the hospital for the whole weekend and stuff. But just because of the cost per room. And one thing that doesn't get talked about hardly as much anymore, but at least in Oklahoma City, there's still a lot of beds being used up by COVID patients. So finding a bed, like the biggest part of her time in the hospital after surgery was the fact that there wasn't a bed, even in ICU, available. Almost immediately when she got transferred to ICU, they're like, well, hey, you can go home in a couple hours. But I think it was almost like maybe 10 hours. No, the surgery was a long surgery, so it was like a 5 or 6 hour surgery. But there was several hours where it was just like trying to find a bed that they could, a room that they could put her in that was, safe and everything. And then the room they had her in for the most of that time, you couldn't have a visitor in there because it was multiple patients. So, room shortage is still a big issue, at least in Oklahoma City right now. And I would imagine that a good chunk of that is because of COVID. Which is weird because COVID feels like it's so far away right now, compared to when we started this podcast.
Yeah, totally.
And that was just, literally 7 months ago, or at least my part in it. So yeah, it's kind of crazy, but she is doing better. They're going to find out some more stuff. But it's amazing how our biases also, like I said, she's around 70 years old. It's very easy from, again, the time period I grew up in, a 70-year-old person, you already were, that was always considered someone that was already on the decline. And now 70-year-olds are like the new 66-year-olds. They've still got energy and stuff. And so energy, or, their resting face and body action stuff, it's not the same as it was 30 or 40 years ago. It's like a whole new world for people that are in their 70s specifically, but probably even 80s to an extent. So yeah, it's some of the biases that I used to have against age aren't necessarily there in the way that they were before.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's just amazing, like how all this stuff, some of the robotic surgery stuff too, where you can literally have a computer do surgery. It's just it's quite amazing.
It's like we're in those sci-fi worlds that they always talked about, but we're just the things that we're doing that are amazing wouldn't, like, again, 10, 15 years ago, we're like, oh, wow. And then the stuff that everybody thinks of when they think of sci-fi, like, we're nowhere close to it.
Well, and I wonder how much now is kind of created from sci-fi.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of, whether it like be James Bond or Star Trek or stuff like that. There's a lot of inventions that I see now that were conceptualized kind of in this literary sense back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember. I like watching old clips of SNL, and there was one from about, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, where they're talking about the history of the world around 2020, and they're talking about all the technological advancements and the outdated thinking as a joke. Like, this is supposed to be like 2782 or something, and they're like, yeah, we thought that cancer was incurable, and everybody laughs. And then there's like, but there was a time when, I mean, there's some political stuff in there too, but it was just one of those things where 500 years ago compared to today, I couldn't even fathom how different the medical technology is. So we definitely have a way of where future thinking and kind of reverse engineering it on some areas has definitely brought our quality of life up. Yeah,
definitely. One of the things I think is kind of interesting that I know some people are working on now are literally like kind of handheld medical diagnostic tools.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be pretty amazing. But that was something that I originally saw in, the 1960s era Star Trek.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so funny that when the iPad and the iPhone came out, the fact that everybody's like, oh, we can finally do Star Trek, but that was more true than they ever believed and even understood at the time. Like, because of the iPad and iPhone and now smart technology as a whole, we are finally able to do some of the stuff that, I mean, it's still amazing that I can have this phone in my hand and it's able to do so much. And that's in addition to playing Angry Birds. It's just crazy.
Yeah. Technology's come quite a long way.
It has indeed, and it's continuing to do so, both in good ways. If you would like to learn more about the New Next podcast, find us at thenewNextPodcast.com, where you can suggest a topic you would like for us to cover. If you enjoyed what you heard, share the podcast, tell a friend about it, or rate us with 5 stars.